So another major issue is the Hillary Clinton deposition issue, and I've been talking to you about that as well. This was a major case by Judicial Watch. This is the case, large measure, that uncovered the Clinton email scandal. We had asked about Benghazi records, and I think it was 2014. Why did we ask? Because Benghazi was a major scandal. You know what, guys? It still is a major scandal. Don't you agree? 4 Americans died, and Obama and Clinton lied about it. And they lied about it to make sure that Barack Obama would be reelected. Libya was destroyed by the Obama administration. It became a way station for jihadists. It was the vehicle or the port of entry for many jihadists to fight with ISIS in that Syria war. We had documents showing the weapons actually moving out of Benghazi. The CIA or our national security establishment knew about that. We uncovered how the Obama White House was behind the fake talking points that Susan Rice used to try to lie to the American people. That it was a spontaneous protest in response to a video that led to the Benghazi killings, when in fact it was a planned terrorist attack, and they knew it at the time. Our documents show that. So our work led to the creation of the Benghazi Select Committee. But one thing we noticed, because we're getting all these hot documents, groundbreaking documents that were changing history, and where were the Clinton emails? And we suspected there was a game going on. I initially thought maybe there were no Clinton emails. But just because I suspected it, it doesn't mean we weren't going to check. So we asked more specifically, and they came back to us and said, oh, here's everything. And of course, it didn't include Clinton emails. And then they finally said, after we pushed back on them, well, we've given you everything, but we have these other documents to search. And it turns out they were the Clinton emails. They didn't tell us that, and they didn't tell the court that. Needless to say, the court was pretty ticked about it. And so eventually the court, specifically Judge Royce Lamberth, granted us discovery. And the outlines of that discovery were issued, I think, in late 2018, and the discovery took place over the last year or so. And we received boatloads of information that Hillary Clinton was warned and should have been known about the use of her emails being a national security and other issues, that the State Department knew about her email usage and was trying to cover her up, that the Obama White House was involved in covering it up. The Obama White House knew. The FBI and State Department were telling us in the courts they'd given us everything they could find on Hillary Clinton's emails. They told the courts that on multiple occasions. And lo and behold, they found more Clinton emails just recently. And so that and other testimonies show was enough to get the court pretty upset with the skullduggery by the Justice Department and the State Department, which continued to oppose discovery. And I'm talking about the Obama Justice Department, folks. I'm not talking about the Obama State Department. I'm talking about this State Department and this Justice Department. And they opposed our efforts to get discovery, get witnesses, get some of these questions answered. And the judge, was just fed up with their pretending there were no issues still to be discussed here or uncovered, because the judge wants to know that Hillary Clinton used this system to avoid FOIA. Were there other records to be found? And what was the other? Oh, and whether they were trying to hoodwink the court. So long story short, the court issued a dramatic ruling that Hillary Clinton be deposed by Judicial Watch directly, and that he found her prior statements to be under oath, which were in writing, to be unhelpful. So that testimony was supposed to take place by May, I think 15th or 16th. Now the coronavirus may have caused some delay in that, in theory, in the end, but that wasn't what's going on now, because Hillary Clinton filed what is a really desperate legal motion. It's called a writ of mandamus, essentially suing the court going to the appellate court and telling the appellate court that you got to stop the lower court from doing this. It was an abuse. And I have an indisputable right not to testify. That's right, an indisputable right not to testify. So, as a former cabinet official, 9 years out now, that she can't be bothered to testify, that the court needs to step in. And so this is completely out there in terms of any legal argument. And so we had to file our opposition on Friday. But also, guess who else filed an opposition? The State Department and Justice Department. I mean, they didn't want this questioning to go on, but even this gambit by Hillary Clinton was too much for them. So you had the State Department, Justice Department, which had tried to stop her questioning, coming into court and saying, we don't support Hillary Clinton's mandamus motion because it's not appropriate. So, and our brief is just fantastic. It was written by my colleagues, attorney colleagues, Ramona Kotka and Paul Orphanides. I'm sure other lawyers had a hand in it as well. Ramona, has been leading this case since the beginning, and we argued that Clinton and Mills, Cheryl Mills, her chief of staff, who thinks also evidently she's too important to testify. She's a former chief of staff. It's ridiculous. We argue that Clinton and Mills must demonstrate that they have no other adequate means of relief, which they failed to show. Also, Clinton and Mills do not demonstrate that the district court's order was a judicial usurpation of power or a clear abuse of discretion, or that Clinton and Mills, again, have a clear and indisputable right to a writ. In fact, the district court reasonably concluded that Clinton's previous explanation for using a personal email server are cursory, incomplete, and seemingly at odds with what discovery has yielded to date. Judicial Watch also argued that Clinton and Mills are trying to avoid their deposition testimony by relying on their status as, quote, former high-level government officials. They don't offer a single case from this court or any other holding that former high-level government officials should not be required to follow regular appellate channels to challenge a discovery order. Particularly in Mills' case, Judicial Watch notes they identify no case in which a court entertained a mandamus petition to stop the deposition of even a sitting cabinet member's chief of staff. Frankly, if she were in the cabinet, we'd still be able to depose her under the law. Judicial Watch also argues against Clinton's argument that the server, this is classic, because I don't think I've alerted you to this argument that she had made. And you're going to like the analogy that our lawyers came up with here. Judicial Watch also argues against Clinton's argument that she held the server under claim of right when it contained thousands of federal records. Judicial Watch states that unlike other secretaries of state like Henry Kissinger, because there was this big case with Kissinger where he had his records, he took his records, and the law was less clear back then, and I think kicked it over to the National Archives or a third party, and so there was a big brouhaha about access to the Kissinger records. Now, unlike other secretaries of state like Henry Kissinger, Clinton did not obtain an opinion from state's legal advisor on whether she could take the federal records prior to her departure from state. So Kissinger got legal advice before he took the records. Clinton's claim of right argument over her server would also be like bank robbery. I've always been of the opinion that Hillary Clinton stole those records and should have been held accountable in that regard under criminal law. But in the case of her deposition, we explain a bank robber who stuffed bills into a duffel bag during a robbery may own the bag, but has no claim of right to the stolen cash. Is Clinton claiming a legal right to the agency records stored on the server? If so, petitioners offer no factual or legal support for such a claim. While the server may not have been Clinton's property, the agency records on the server plainly were not. And what I like particularly about Judicial Watch's litigation is because we kind of try to write the briefs. We try to pursue litigation that's accessible to every American. So I encourage you to read our lawsuits. I encourage you to read our briefs. And I'm a non-lawyer, and And I can understand them. I'm not super smart. So, read them. They're interesting. They're interesting if you're interested in law, and they're interesting especially if you're a citizen who's interested in the ability of groups like Judicial Watch and citizens like Judicial Watch to use the law to hold government officials accountable. And so we highlight through this litigation what the law requires, what the underlying scandal issues are often, because we're often pursuing scandal information. And we also highlight the efforts of the government and government officials like Hillary Clinton to avoid the consequences of their illicit decisions, and how they sometimes misuse the law and misstate the law in order to get that done. And we do that in a way that most everybody can understand. So I encourage you, as said, to read that brief that we put out. And maybe I'll read the entire brief next time. Give me a comment, and I'll in the video you're watching, and we'll take a look, and maybe I'll read the entire brief, because I did read Judge Lambert's order, which was just fantastic, a few weeks ago in its entirety. So maybe I'll read the entire brief next week. So let me know if you want us to do that. So as I said, the State Department and the Justice Department, the big news is, as said, that Hillary Clinton's gone too far for their liking. Now, you read this brief, and I encourage you to read the Justice Department's brief for the State Department. So what happens is, if we sue the State Department obviously has their lawyers involved, but the Justice Department represents them in the proceedings. So when it comes to cover-up, refusal to obey transparency law, all roads lead through the Justice Department. Because the agencies, their legal position isn't, quote, their own. It's the Justice Department who maintains the legal position. And in our case, as I said, they opposed discovery. They opposed our questioning Hillary Clinton. In fact, they were working with Hillary Clinton's lawyers just recently. It's pretty clear. Excuse me, I need a little something to drink there. So the big question I had, and the big question we all had, was what was the Justice Department going to do with this Mandamus brief? Because it was so obviously out there. Were they going to defend the indefensible? And they didn't. And I encourage you to read the brief, because you can see, almost envision, the Justice Department lawyers choking on their own words as they wrote them down. And you'll see an exercise in dishonesty as well. So I like so much here when we get something from the government that's good or bad, or in this case, somewhat good. I'm both happy that the Justice Department did the right thing, and I'm also outraged because they were still lying, in my view, about what went on with Hillary Clinton's emails. So the Justice Department, and I guess they speak with forked tongue. Is that the way? The government did not, this is what their brief says, again, this is the State Department and Justice Department, deep state, central. The government did not seek, and thus does not support, the extraordinary relief of mandamus due to the unique circumstances of this case. This is the rare situation in which discovery of a former cabinet official, secretary, was not authorized for the impermissible purpose of probing internal government decision-making regarding official policy, but rather to focus on the impact on FOIA compliance of a former official's unusual decision to use a private email server to systematically conduct large volumes of official business. And we wrote, similarly, it's not even clear that Clinton's decision to use a personal email server and the subsequent routing of her emails out of the agency when she left office can be fairly characterized as official action. It was more likely a violation of law. So, the bad side of the courts, of the Justice Department and State Department's brief, was really interesting because it was bad in an interesting way. The Justice Department spent paragraphs defending their own misconduct because the judge in the case accused them of essentially lying to him about the emails. And so they said, we found out about it, and we told them there were other documents to be found. But they didn't tell us they had boxes and bankers' boxes full of Clinton emails that they had to search. And I mean, this was the Secretary of the State Department, and they didn't tell us or the court any details about that until they were forced to. So that was dishonest. And the court is tired of the dishonesty. The lower court rejected their theory of the case, which is they did nothing wrong. Remember, the Justice Department's view is that the Justice Department did nothing wrong related to cover up the Clinton emails. The State Department's view is they did nothing wrong related to the cover up the emails. This is not the Obama administration's position. It's this administration's position. This is why the president is frustrated, because he sees this going on, and he's on our side on these issues. It's clear. You can see it in his tweets. Attorney General Barr and Secretary Pompeo have got to take I don't understand why they're defending this lawlessness. This is what the court said, the lower court at least, when he analyzed the State Department's and Justice Department's defense of the indefensible. There's still more to learn. Even though many important questions remain unanswered, the Justice Department inexplicably, again, this Justice Department, still takes the position that the court should close discovery and rule on dispositive motions, which means end the case. The court is especially troubled by this. To argue that the court now has enough information to determine whether a state conducted an adequate search is preposterous, especially when considering states' deficient representations regarding the existence of additional Clinton emails. Instead, the court will now authorize a new round of discovery. So, this is what she had. I'll give you some other excerpts from the ruling, because the ruling is really great, and I encourage you. If you go to our website, you'll see and maybe we'll link to it here. We can link to the ruling itself, but the press release about this case, most recent, has links to all the issues I'm talking about here, or all the documents I'm reading from here. Discovery, again, from the court's ruling, discovery up until this point has brought to light a noteworthy amount of relevant information, thanks to Judicial Watch. But Judicial Watch requests an additional round of discovery, and understandably so, which each passing round of discovery, the court is left with more questions than answers. Hillary Clinton calls that an abuse of discretion. Obviously, that's balderdash. The court agrees with Judicial Watch. It's time to hear directly from Secretary Clinton. So the good news about the brief that was filed with the appeals court by the State Department and Justice Department, it puts the power of the Justice Department for the first time ever in this case, frankly in any Clinton email case, behind Judicial Watch and against Hillary Clinton. Because I told you the last hearing we were in, where we were trying to get her testimony, discussing that, there were 6 government lawyers on the other side trying to protect Hillary Clinton. This was in December of last year. 6 government lawyers, in addition to 4 lawyers for Hillary Clinton and Cheryl Mills. So there were 10 lawyers. And who was on our side? I think it was Ramona. I don't remember if there was another lawyer there, or maybe one of our lawyers was there. I was there. I was playing client. I'm the president of Judicial Watch. I was there representing the corporation as the client. Can you imagine that? 3 years after President Trump is elected, the Justice Department is defending Hillary Clinton in federal court. Can you believe it? Imagine if you're me. Imagine if you're Ramona sitting there, knowing what the American people think about Clinton's misconduct. And I don't mean Republicans and conservatives. I mean the American people of all stripes. And we've got the government still defending her. So I'm glad the government has decided this wild abuse of the court process by Hillary Clinton is not appropriate. But just remember, at the lower court, they tried to stop her from being deposed. So Mrs. Clinton's brief in response is due on April, I think it's due today, as a matter of fact. So maybe we'll have it later tonight. So you can look at that online as well. I don't know if we'll put it online or how quickly we'll get it up there. But I expect the appellate court should move pretty quickly. We don't know for sure, but they set a quick briefing process, relatively speaking. So I suspect we'll hear back soon from the court. My guess is they'll have a hearing and a telephonic hearing. which may actually provide you real-time access, because these days, because the court is holding hearings over the phone and conference, doing teleconferences, they're actually live streaming them as well. So if that happens, I will be sure to alert you so you can tune in and listen. They're available. It's easy to listen to. They're on YouTube, so you can go and listen to them. So that will happen by, so her brief is due today, and then we'll wait to hear from the court to see what next. So in the meantime, Judicial Watch has discovery pending. There's been no appeal. So of 2 other officials who the evidence shows knew about Hillary Clinton's emails and didn't tell anyone, or at least anyone who should have known on the outside. And we also have pending the ability to subpoena Google, because you may remember that one of her vendors, I think it was Paul Combetta, sent, according to the reports, sent all of her emails to a Google email account. So the judge says, well, maybe there are emails over there. Go subpoena Google. So we're going to find out. So that's something else that we'll be pursuing. I'm not sure what the status of that subpoena is.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.